I'm back. Well, you guys really liked that cupcakes video, and I mean, really liked it. Thank you for that, by the way. Wasn't expecting that video to do half as well as it did. Thanks for all the likes and the comments and the support. So here we are. I said in that video that if you guys wanted, I would do a video on Rocket to Insanity, and, well, here we are. Yes, I'm using the board again. I'm keeping it because I spent like $10 on it. I gotta get my money's worth. So without further ado, let's jump in, starting with a brief summary of the first story in this saga, Rocket to Insanity. Now, I did already go over Rocket to Insanity in my first video on My Little Pony Creepypastas, which focused mainly on cupcakes and its spin-offs. You should go watch that one, by the way, for added context, because I'm not going to go into as much detail here. It'll be up there in the corner, or up there. It's going to be in one of the corners in the cards. Check it out for added context, because I'm really not going to go into too much detail here. But just to give the Cliff Notes version here, Rocket to Insanity is a story inspired by cupcakes, in which Rainbow Dash is plagued by nightmares of Pinkie Pie butchering her and eating her and turning her into cupcakes. And eventually the rest of her friends do join in this nightmare as well. It kind of just leads to a lack of sleep and mental degradation, pushing away her friends until eventually, she snaps and kills Pinkie Pie with a butcher's knife. Just basic stuff. At this time, I would actually like to correct myself, because in my Cupcakes video, I said that Rocket to Insanity was first posted by Deathbolt in October of 2012, and turns out that was actually a repost with an alternate ending, which we'll get into later, actually. The original author is actually Scherzo, who posted it to Equestria Daily on April 7th, 2011. Quick correction there. Thank you for those who corrected me in the comments. Rocket to Insanity actually got a pretty decent amount of notoriety, to the point where a fanfiction user by the name of Don't Wake the Neighbor was inspired to write their own sequel. And they're honestly pretty good, actually, and like I said, one of my personal favorites. So, we'll start this saga with the first sequel, Rocket to Insanity, Fall of the Apple Family. I'm just gonna give a quick content warning here. These stories do contain themes of mental illness and self-harm, and just a lot of gore. Not so much the point of cupcakes, where it's just gory for the sake of being gore, but I'm still just gonna give a warning in case anyone finds those things triggering, which is honestly something I should have done in the first video, so apologies if that happened to you. The first chapter of Rocket to Insanity, Fall of the Apple Family. Yes, that's right, there are multiple chapters to this story, 11 in fact. The first of which is titled Grieving, in which the remaining members of the main six and their friends are all gathered at Pinkie Pie's funeral, which is not your typical funeral. It's decorated like a party with balloons, everybody's wearing colorful outfits, because that's what they think Pinkie would have wanted. And yeah, that checks out. But the big mystery is that, well, nobody knows who killed her, which is really funny because I'm pretty sure Rainbow Dash was found with her body, and I mean, they could always just say that, like, hey, yeah, she just found her body and cradled her in her arms, and that's why she was covered in blood, which is kind of where it ends up going, but we'll get to that. In fact, it's revealed that a murder hasn't happened in Equestria in hundreds of years? How? You got me. But this is a pretty big deal because, well, the element of laughter is now gone, so Princess Celestia herself even shows up to the funeral to give her speech where she vows to find the foul murderer and bring them to justice and return peace to Equestria. But while all this is going on, Dash is just standing off in the corner trying not to tweak, battling back and forth with the voices in her head. Well, I guess it's one voice. The very same voice that drove her to kill Pinkie Pie in the first place. It's very obvious from the start that Rainbow Dash is not okay. I mean, she's beating herself on the head, she's talking to herself. It's really funny that nobody seems to notice until she starts screaming. Plus, it doesn't help with the added stress that nobody knows she's the one who killed Pinkie Pie, so she's just holding in that secret. Definitely not doing any favors to her already fragile mental state. Chapter 2 ends up showing Rainbow Dash running off from the funeral out into the Everfree Forest, where she beats herself up quite literally, throwing herself into trees and getting covered in bruises and splinters until Applejack eventually finds her and manages to calm her down and, well, actually quell the voice in her head for the first time in weeks. But, yeah, it doesn't last very long, because in the next chapter, the voice just comes back louder than ever, causing Rainbow Dash to just destroy her house. I mean, she's throwing furniture, she's smashing chairs and plates and hurting herself in the process. In a final act of desperation, she grabs a knife out of her kitchen and attempts to, well, end herself, but the voice gaslights her into not going through with it. I'm not joking. Like this is literally how the exchange goes, right? Do it. She grasped the blade tightly, slowly pressing it harder and harder against her stomach. She openly sobbed as she tried everything to force the shard into her, but she just couldn't will herself to do it. Do it, and everyone will know. It was true. The blade just pierced her hide before she dropped it and stared at the floor, watching the blood drip from the tiny wound. She started to gently giggle at the sight in front of her. Think of all your friends. Think of Scootaloo. Think of what it would do to her tiny filly mind. No pony will be there to bury you. You'll be all alone, all alone. This leads Rainbow Dash to snapping yet again, seemingly for good this time as the madness finally consumes her mind. And I quote, "She soon found herself grinning as her mind surrendered to the madness that consumed her. Slowly, minute by minute, she began to slip away until eventually she was gone." Now this is where the fun begins. I mean, come on, it's not called Fall of the Apple Family for nothing. You like my nice cyan tie? I got it just for this video, because it matches Rainbow Dash's hide. At least I tried to color match it as best as I could. The next chapter is titled One Must Bleed, and, well, this is where the shit hits the fan. Again. See, Applejack is attacked by a deranged Rainbow Dash in the barn at Sweet Apple Acres, and the reveal of Rainbow Dash is actually done pretty well. I mean, just listen to this. Applejack could only gasp as she realized who the mysterious figure was. It was Rainbow Dash. Her mane was ruined, her body was covered head to hoof in cuts and bruises, and her eyes were completely bloodshot. So, Rainbow Dash attacks Applejack and attempts to strangle her until Applejack realizes there's a splinter sticking out of Rainbow Dash's leg and just kind of pushes it in deeper, giving her a chance to buck Rainbow Dash off of her, throwing her down the stairs into the cellar of the barn. Also, Rainbow Dash broke the latch on the barn door, so Applejack is trapped in the barn with Rainbow Dash, but the only way out is to actually go through the cellar, where Rainbow Dash is now lying in wait. So she has no choice but to try to make her way through the cellar and gets into yet another scrap with Rainbow Dash. She almost makes it out of the other exit just to get kicked back down the stairs by Rainbow Dash, who then attempts to throw a pitchfork at her, which barely gets dodged and lodged in the wall behind Applejack. Keep that in your mind. Eventually, Applejack manages to seize an opportunity to try to escape yet again, but is intercepted by Rainbow Dash, who kicks her so hard she flies backwards and gets impaled on the pitchfork handle that's sticking out of the wall and dies. And it's just, again, really good descriptive writing. A painful crunch resounded across the room as the blunt instrument tore through her flesh, her muscles, and her bones. Applejack couldn't breathe, and there was a warm, flooding feeling spreading throughout her chest. She looked down to see the blunt handle of the pitchfork sticking out of her chest, completely covered in blood. She was pinned against the wall, and she couldn't move. She could feel her blood pouring out of her wound onto her hooves and finally onto the floor. She began to cry in pain as she looked in front of her to see Rainbow Dash walking towards her, grinning and laughing, holding the large splinter from before. Honestly, this entire chapter is awesome and feels like a sequence out of like an 80s slasher movie. And it really sells the struggle of Applejack trying to escape while also trying not to hurt her friend. The next couple of chapters continue to show Rainbow Dash's downward spiral. And, well, she attempts to lure Scootaloo to the barn where she killed Applejack to kill her as well. And she does manage to get Scootaloo pinned down, but before she can deliver the death blow, something interesting happens. The arm holding the splinter was shaken from shoulder to hoof, almost like an invisible force was holding it back. Rainbow Dash let out a small whimper before looking at her hand. Should be hoof, but that's what the quote says. Just then, the hoof holding the splinter thrust itself into Rainbow Dash's right eye. See, this is where the story really started to get interesting for me, because now it isn't just, oh, Rainbow Dash went crazy. No, now there's actually a bit more to it, you know? It's more like something is possessing her to do these things. And now she's trying to fight against it by hurting herself. Is it a curse? Is it a parasite? Is it some sort of, like, split personality caused by trauma? We don't know. Anyway, Scootaloo takes the chance to run off and go find Big Mac, who then tells her to go and get Twilight. Now here's where the horror tropes come in, right? You think if he was smart, he would go with Scootaloo to get Twilight, but nope. He goes off to the barn by himself to see what's what. Obviously, he gets attacked by Rainbow Dash, who stabs him in the back with a splinter. You know, and they struggle until Big Mac stumbles down the stairs into the cellar where he discovers the body of Applejack. And Big Mac gets pissed. Big Macintosh slammed his hooves on the ground before cradling his head with them. His heart felt like it had been ripped into a million pieces. He continued bawling into his arms until his true emotion struck him like lightning. He could feel his blood boil and his muscles burn as he felt his sorrow slowly become overpowered by pure, unadulterated hatred. If he wasn't mad before, he sure as hell was now. Big Macintosh stood on his back legs before ramming his front hooves into the ground, causing the entire barn to shake, before he roared into the ceiling, his rage extinguishing what little remorse he had left for Rainbow Dash and replaced it with pure anger. It's about to go down. Big Mac scraps for Rainbow Dash yet again, but this time he's out for revenge. Even though Big Mac has the strength advantage, Rainbow Dash has the speed advantage, and she manages to outmaneuver him and eventually get him pinned under rubble from the falling roof. She then proceeds to knock over a barrel of apple cider, coating Big Mac and most of the barn, and then putting a torch to it, lighting him on fucking fire. Like he burns to death. I mean, she attempts to fly away, but Big Mac manages to grab her tail with his teeth. Eventually, she struggles so hard to get away that her tail gets ripped off, and she falls into the flames, getting burned, but manages to scramble out of the barn before it collapses. So now Rainbow Dash has been beaten up by Applejack, beaten up by Big Mac, had her tail ripped off, been stabbed in the eye, stabbed in the leg, and now set on fire. And she's somehow still alive. God damn, is she resilient. Now Big Mac is gone, and the barn is reduced to cinders. So, let's get this out of the way. So, yep. He's dead. And now she's gone. 2 down, 3 to go. 3 down if you count Pinkie Pie. The next chapter is just the rest of the main 6. Well, I guess 3 of them. It's just Twilight, Rarity, and Fluttershy coming to terms with the fact that it was Rainbow Dash who did this to Applejack and Big Mac, and realizing it was her who also killed Pinkie Pie. I mean, you found her cradling her corpse covered in her blood with a knife nearby. I mean, does Equestria not have forensics? Is forensics magic just not a thing? Could you not have just used a spell to see what happened? I mean, there's a spell for everything. Okay, well, to be fair, this was like pre-season 4, so I guess, you know, Twilight's not an alicorn yet. Magic isn't that big of a MacGuffin yet outside of the elements, so it gets a pass. There's actually a great exchange in this chapter between Twilight and Princess Celestia, who shows up to give her condolences. And it just really shows how hurt Twilight is, you know? She's like, oh, you said you would have been there. Why weren't you there? You could have stopped this. And it's just, I mean, irrational, but also makes sense given her grief-ridden state. So again, gets a pass. So because of the danger that Rainbow Dash poses now that she's at large on the loose, the rest of the main 6, I can't even call them 6 anymore. There's just 3 of them. The main 3. Ugh, that doesn't have as good of a ring to it. But anyway, the main 3 are forced to move into the Castle of the Two Sisters, which is in the Everfree Forest, which actually wouldn't have really been given that much exposition at this point in the show. Yeah, because you see it in, like, Season 1 where they find the elements of harmony, but, like, you never really see it again after that until, like, I think Season 5? Whatever. After a heated argument, Twilight manages to convince Rarity and Fluttershy that maybe they need to help their friend Rainbow Dash. They need to help her. They need to save her. Get her through whatever's making her do these things. And it's really funny because Rarity's just like, are you fucking dumb? Like, she killed 2 of our friends and Big Mac and burned the barn at Sweet Apple Acres to the ground, Twilight. But eventually they reluctantly agree to help her, and well, they leave with Spike in the middle of the night, leaving a note, and basically commit treason. Real smart. That's where this story ends, with a to be continued. 2 of the elements of harmony are dead, Big Mac is dead, Sweet Apple Acres is burned to the ground, and now the rest of our main characters are enemies of the state. This is just off to a great start. With all that being said and done, it brings us to our next story in this saga. Rocket to Insanity, Dawn of a Dying Pegasus. I just want you to know that I was just standing here talking, and I got about 4 minutes in before I realized that I forgot to hit record on my camera. And oh man, it happens. Anyway, Rocket to Insanity, Dawn of a Dying Pegasus takes place 3 weeks after the events of Fall of the Apple Family, and now picks up with Twilight, Rarity, Fluttershy, and Spike on the train to Canterlot on their way to talk to one of Twilight's old friends named Meanie Mo. No, that's not a joke, but she is an expert on the pony psyche, so she might be able to help diagnose whatever's wrong with Rainbow Dash. And honestly, there's like some James Bond shit going on here, because they've all donned magical disguises. Spike is invisible with an invisibility spell. They've all donned different characters and cutie marks. And they somehow managed to bluff their way through all the guards swarming the Canterlot train station. Fluttershy takes Spike to the hotel before the invisibility spell wears off, and Twilight and Rarity go to Meanie Mo's house to talk to her, and she reluctantly agrees to help them. Now, it's honestly pretty impressive how Meanie Mo is able to diagnose what's wrong with Rainbow Dash, given the very limited information that both Twilight and Rarity supply her. I mean, basically all they can tell her is like, well, I mean, she was acting a little weird before all this happened, and well, she was, kind of tired looking, and she was also being pretty distant and jumpy and a little paranoid. And Meanie Mo just goes, oh, that sounds like nightmares. But I mean, nightmares on their own wouldn't be enough to cause a psychotic break like that. But then, she has like the most Pinkie Pie Eureka moment I have ever seen, where she literally just goes, well, yeah, I mean, unless it's like this ancient poison that inflicts nightmares, and Rarity's like, yeah, but like nightmares can't be that bad, and I quote to you, Meanie Mo literally says, yeah, these aren't your simple falling from the sky or drowning or being chased by bears nightmares. Now, these nightmares are some of the most gruesome, horrifying, and explicit nightmares a pony could suffer. Sometimes they can be as terrible as watching your friends mutilating your body as you lay there to watch them feast on your insides. Hit the nail on the fucking head there, she did. Damn impressive. So it turns out that, yes, these nightmares and subsequent psychotic breakdowns are actually the result of an ancient poison that someone infected Rainbow Dash with that will slowly eat away at her mind until, and I quote, there's nothing left but hatred and anger. Oh yeah, and there's also no known cure. Basic stuff. I don't really know how to feel about this revelation. I mean, on the one hand, it does lead to a really good mystery now about, like, okay, well, who poisoned Rainbow Dash and why? And how do we fix it? But then, on the other hand, it's like, well, okay, it was kind of a bit more intriguing just to say, like, hey, this was just from a mental health episode and lack of support and, people trying to reach out to her and help her. But I mean, you gotta take it with a grain of salt. This still makes for a great story too. So, Twilight comes up with the idea that, hey, if it's eating away at her memories, if I can get to her and cast a memory spell on her, then it might bring her back to her senses. At least long enough for us to figure out what to do. Don't know how you came to that conclusion, but then they decide, okay, well, we're gonna go find her and attempt to save her. Yeah, go after the crazed psychopath, the half-burnt, half-dead psychopath, homicidal, genocidal, suicidal maniac, right? If you got that reference, you're awesome, by the way. So they decide to look for her in the Everfree Forest because that's where all the ghoulies and ghosties hang out. Except Zecora, of course, she's cool. By this point, Rainbow Dash has fully succumbed to her madness and is just completely out for blood. Our four heroes, I keep saying three because I forget Spike is there. Sorry, little guy. Eventually, they end up falling into a pitfall trap that presumably Rainbow Dash dug with her own hooves. Okay. And end up getting split up in a cave system as a result. Ah, yes. The good old horror movie cliche of splitting up the heroes to be picked off one by one. This is gonna get good. Of course, Fluttershy and Angel Bunny are the first ones to run into Rainbow Dash, who somehow got a bear trap set up down there somehow. No idea where she's getting this equipment. Anyway, but Fluttershy gets her leg stuck in a bear trap, and Rainbow Dash, kills Angel Bunny in front of her by stepping on his head, and then proceeds to wail on Fluttershy, relentlessly beating her within an inch of her life, and then just turns around and leaves, which was confusing at first, but then it makes sense when a rabid pack of Timberwolves shows up and attacks Fluttershy, killing her. How ironic, the pony whose special talent is befriending wild animals being eaten alive by wild animals. But this scene allows us to get a good look at Rainbow Dash in her all beat up and burnt glory. I mean, it was her. Fluttershy could see the mutilated Pegasus limping towards her with a mad grin on her face, her body covered head to toe in third-degree burns, blisters, and matted fur. She'd be completely unrecognizable if it wasn't for that one magenta eye that was staring at her like a lion stares at its prey. Fluttershy gasped as she stared into the cavity in her skull where the other eye was supposed to be. Instead, there was nothing but twisted flesh and broken tendons. As the crazed Pegasus got closer, Fluttershy could see that her mad grin was the rotting flesh around her mouth, which had been ripped off, giving her the truly disturbing smile. Well, that's another one off the list. But as sad as that sounds, at least Rarity's still around and kicking, right? Right? Yeah, no. No. Rainbow Dash finds Rarity in another branch of the cave filled with blue diamonds. Anyway, as per horror movie rules, Rarity runs into the Cyan Killer, who creatively uses the environment to her advantage. Yeah, she tackles Rarity to the ground and then uses her teeth to rip her horn off. So, yeah, even playing field now. No magic for you. The Rarity does her best to try to dodge her and hide until Rainbow Dash just gets frustrated and just kicks the wall of the cave, causing some diamond stalagmites, the ones that are on the ceiling, to fall and impale Rarity, killing her. Well, there we go, guess. Yep, and another one bites the dust. It's just the way it is. Just the way it goes. So now it's just Spike and Twilight left, who has no idea that Rainbow Dash is the only friend she has left alive, which is really sad in hindsight. I also want to point out that the top comment at the bottom of this chapter on FimFiction has a YouTube link that just links to a video compilation of the Joker laughing, which, yeah, I mean, I guess given by that description in like the rotting flesh smile, she does kind of look like the Jonkler, huh? So Twilight runs in the Rainbow Dash and during the struggle gets thrown through a thin wall in the cave where she discovers what's left of Fluttershy. And she also finds Rarity's impaled corpse on the ground, which seeing her other two friends dead just causes her to say, fuck it, this bitch is dying today. It is pretty reasonable, given the circumstances. And Twilight actually manages to overpower Rainbow Dash. And, well, she throws her into a wall, causing her to snap back to reality, where Rainbow Dash then begs Twilight to kill her to put an end to all this madness. But Twilight refuses because, well, Rainbow Dash is the only friend she has left. But before she can act, Rainbow Dash tackles Twilight and bites her on the muzzle, which is like this area, the mouth area of the pony, and just bites down hard and almost tries to rip it off. In fact, the story says that it actually breaks her jaw. But throughout the struggle, Twilight manages to cast the memory spell on Rainbow Dash, bringing her back to her senses. At least Twilight has one friend that survived this ordeal, albeit beaten and bruised and burnt and missing an eye and a tail, and her wings are fucked up. But she's alive, right? Well, it turns out Spike, who I completely forgot about, managed to escape the cave and go find Princess Celestia and tell her about what's happening. And, well, Celestia confronts Twilight and Rainbow Dash, and it pretty much goes like this.
You have committed crimes against Equestria. How do you plead? Not guilty by reason of insanity. Guilty.
Twilight does her best to take the brunt of the hit, but it still fatally wounds Rainbow Dash, sending them both flying into a pit. And I'll just breeze through the next couple of chapters since not much happens. I mean, Twilight's brought to the hospital and given emergency surgery and recovers. Celestia tries to apologize for what she did, trying to get Twilight to understand that it was for the good of Equestria. Twilight's not having it and tells Celestia to fuck off, but I mean, you know, that's it, right? I mean, Rainbow Dash is dead. Peace is restored to Equestria, right? Nana! A warm flush of heat swept her body. She suddenly breathed heavily as the pain grew worse. Twilight reached for the nurse's alarm, being so disoriented she knocked it off the wall. Her condition began to grow worse. She was now beginning to hyperventilate, the heart rate monitor working overtime, keeping up with her pulse. Twilight's knowledge then started to take over. She could remember wiping blood from a possessed friend's face off of her face, off her muzzle, her now infected muzzle. Twilight suddenly realized what was going on. She laid down on her bed, trying to scream, but her body wouldn't allow her to. She could feel her blood rushing through her body as she heard a deathly silent whisper in the distance, the voice all too familiar to her ears. Kill them. Yep, that's right. Whatever this poison thing is can be transmitted through blood-to-blood contact. And now it's infected Twilight Sparkle. Which leads us to Rocket to Insanity, Twilight's Passage. So I'm going to be honest with you, not much really happens in Twilight's Passage. I mean, there is some good moments with, you know, Twilight coming to terms with the fact that literally all of her friends are now dead. Rainbow Dash was executed in front of her, and she is no longer Celestia's student, so she's basically lost everything. And now, whatever was plaguing Rainbow Dash's mind is now slowly eating away at her own mind and sanity. I mean, there are good moments of her, you know, battling with the voice in her head and basically resisting the urge to kill Spike. And then there's also the lingering subplot of her trying to figure out who infected Rainbow Dash and why, but unfortunately, that's a question that will never be answered because, well, Twilight's Passage was canceled after just 8 chapters and is still incomplete to this day. I know. I'm just as disappointed as you are, but I mean, life happens, I guess. Hell, no one's even seen Don't Wake the Neighbor since 2014, so they've been Mia for a while. Wherever they are, I hope you're doing well. Hope they're living their best life. But we're not quite done yet, because in the comments of my last My Little Pony creepypasta video, I know I keep mentioning it, but trust me, there's a reason for it other than just self-plugging. I was informed that there was actually a comic version of Rocket to Insanity adapted based off the alternate ending. But, you know, I couldn't just put pictures of it up here because my board's pretty full, so that's why I got this. That's right, we got budget now, y'all. So this comic is created by a DeviantArt user under the name of Seven Tozen or Seven Tuzen. Feel free to correct me in the comments, please. I'm bad with names. And is based off the alternate ending to Rocket to Insanity, written by a fanfiction user under the name of Dark Jester, and is 104 pages long. I'm not joking. I experienced this through the full comic dub on Scribbler Productions' YouTube channel, and I recommend watching it because it's really entertaining and very well done. That full dub is almost 4.5 hours long. The basic gist of it is that Pinkie Pie survives the brutal attack by Rainbow Dash in the first Rocket to Insanity, and is transported to the hospital where she undergoes emergency surgery and eventually pulls through and makes a recovery. The equestrian healthcare system must be something else. Can I get some of that? I'll never know what that's like. I'm American. Ultimately, each of her friends end up forgiving her once she finally explains herself as to why she did what she did, and it's honestly a really good story about forgiveness. Even Pinkie Pie forgives her once she wakes up from her coma, but I'm gonna be completely honest with you, my ADHD ass was not sitting through 4.5 hours of content, so I did some skipping around. Like really just like the first 45 minutes is what I watched, which encompasses like the first Rocket to Insanity, and then really from there it goes and it does its own thing. From what I saw when I skipped to later parts of the video, it goes down some pretty crazy rabbit holes. I mean, like towards the end, like Princess Luna shows up and like she fights like this weird like nightmare tentacle guy who may or may not have been Princess Celestia's lover back in the day. And then this thing shows up? Like, what the fuck is that? But Luna manages to beat the source of the nightmares, and, well, all is right with the world. Rainbow Dash is back to normal, and peace has been returned to the land. And that's, in a nutshell, a very small nutshell, the Rocket to Insanity comic. Like I said, it's 104 pages, and the dub is 4.5 hours long. It's a lot to go into, but it is an interesting read, and like I said, it's really good to see the artist's art improve as time goes on, because it goes from being like, crayon drawings on paper to actual really clean digital artwork. And well, that concludes the Rocket to Insanity saga. It's very well written in my opinion, and I'm still disappointed that Twilight's Passage wasn't finished, but I mean, what are you gonna do? There have been a couple of attempts of people trying to finish it. There's Twilight's Revenge, which is a couple chapters. It's not very good. I hate when things are left unfinished. Who knows, maybe some aspiring writer or fanfic writer here could write their own ending to this and finish the story. You never know. But, as always, I'm the Wildcard, and I'll see you next time. Peace.